The British Columbia Institute of Technology acknowledges that our campuses are located on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh.
Hello, I'm Isabella Calisi, and this is your news update to 11:30. The Toronto Dominion, or TD, Bank is being fined for just over $3 billion from U.S. regulators in relation to a money laundering investigation. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland says the bank has pleaded guilty to criminal charges. Prosecutors are saying money laundering networks have collectively transferred hundreds of millions of dollars through TD bank accounts over the years. And BC Wildfire Conservative Group is offering a $1,000 award for information relating to a suspected bear poaching incident. The group received a report about the incident on October 5th, where two bears were found tied together and floating on a river in the Fraser Valley. The creatures had their paws and internal organs removed, leaving conservationists to suspect bear poaching. Leslie Fox is the executive director of the group Fur Bearers and says poaching has no place in BC. Anyone with information or video footage from a trail camera is encouraged to contact investigators. And in Manitoba, the province has had little progress in reducing its number of sleep-related infant deaths. In a new report from the Manitoba Advocate for Children and Youth, it says there were 48 related infant deaths from 2019 to 2021. This is roughly the same rate found in an earlier study from 2009 to 2018. And an independent advocate, Sherry Gott, says despite government efforts to educate parents about safe sleep habits for infants, not much has changed. Gott says the majority of cases have occurred in overcrowded homes, with 81% of deaths being Indigenous children. And onto the states. Hurricane Milton made landfall last night on the west coast of Florida. As a Category 3 storm, millions are without power and at least 4 people have died. Canadian press reporter Rob Westgate is currently vacationing at Disney World and was told to stay in his room during the storm. Westgate says there is very minimal damage to the Orlando resort and that the park will be closed for the rest of the day. And famous rapper Sean Diddy Combs is going to make his first appearance before a judge over his sex trafficking charges. As it would be explained, Combs is calling the trial unfair, saying that the judge is releasing information ahead of the jury. He's supposed to appear in court later this afternoon. And Ethel Kennedy, a prominent social activist and widow of the late Senator Robert F. Kennedy, has died at the age of 96. She was a mother of 11 children and founder of the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights. Kennedy spent much of her life advocating for many causes. This included farm workers in Florida and joining a hunger strike against former President Trump's immigration policies. And internationally, Russia is recruiting young African women to work in its factories, producing drones to use against Ukraine. An investigation by the Associated Press found that foreigners and Russian teens are to be crucial in producing the Iranian-designed drones. The people from Africa were lured to Russia by a massive social media campaign promising free airfare and a work-study program. However, many of the women are complaining about the long hours and being under constant surveillance. I'm Isabel Gleason, Mystery News 1130.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow. This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
Welcome to Go With Grace.
Help me heal my people.
His whole family have beautiful singing voices. His sister, his brother, they're all beautiful singers. Sometimes he'll sing at some of the funerals, like here in Musqueam, and his acts will be tears coming down their face because he has a singing voice like his father, late Miles Sparrow, so his sisters are reminded of how their brother used to sing. So he has his dad's voice.
Hi, I'm your host, Grace Chen.
And I'm your host, Grace Miller. Welcome to today's episode, Following a Path of Personal Reconciliation.
Blanketing exercise all those times, and I went back to my childhood and, looked at the decisions were made under drugs and alcohol for the last 100 years. So when people were doing all that stuff, it was a dangerous place when I was growing up.
Yes.
So when we realized that even my children and grandchildren were always going to be affected by what was going on, because that connection was broken with my children.
Our journey began at the Sparrows' residence on Musqueam 2 land, where we spoke with Martin Sparrow, an elder, and his wife, Shauna Sparrow, founder of Moontide Reconciliation.
She specializes in the Kairos blanket exercise, a visually immersive experiences that places people into the history of indigenous peoples and what they went through.
So I was born in 1968, and my mother passed away in 1971. So when she passed away in 1971, I became a 60 scoop. So I became a part of the federal government. To no permission from my father. My father was at work, and when I came home, I was gone. So, and then my mother passed away in 1971, residential survivor from the Kamloops Indian Residential School. Father, survivor of the Kamloops Indian Residential School, and he passed away in 2023. So when he passed, on both ends of the spectrum, you know that mother passed away way too soon from the impacts of residential school. And then you have father, big time impacted because he was the oldest in his family, so he tried to protect his brothers. So now you know why there was dysfunction within community, within family, and why there was so much drinking back in the day, and why the parenting was the way it was, even when I did meet him, why it was the way it was.
As we sat in a circle in their living room, they would go on to explain how colonialism and colonization didn't end with the residential schools and didn't end once Indigenous peoples in Canada gained rights. It's still impacting their lives today.
And the few times that I went fishing in the last few years, I dealt with CP Rail, RCMP, and DFO, the Departments of Fisheries officers. So this is who we deal with all the time, is even as Musqueam fishermen, they're dealing with the Department of Fisheries and officers and RCMP, and it's huge racism still out on the waters.
After getting to know Shauna and Martin a little bit better, they were kind enough to allow us to attend the Union of BC Indian Chiefs meeting happening at the Musqueam Cultural Center, a few blocks away from their house.
Does the door need to be locked?
Oh yeah, press the...
Just that button?
Yeah.
Wow, it's a beautiful day.
It is.
Yeah.
That's a solid one. 4 guys walking down on it.
Oh, big peppers.
And a dog.
On the way to the center, I had no idea what to expect. I wasn't even thinking of what to expect. I heard meeting and assumed that it was going to be the same as any other meeting I'd been to before. I was more so grateful that they trusted us enough to let them into their community.
For myself, I didn't expect the Chiefs meeting to be any different from other meetings I've attended, but what really took me by delight was the wonderful community next door where there was a marketplace.
All right, at the Musqueam Cultural Center. It's beautiful. A lot of my teachers had mentioned how beautiful the center was when we brought up the topic of our story that we wanted to cover. They were not kidding. It is beautiful. Although we didn't stay for the full meeting, experiencing what a decolonized meeting looks like was a very meaningful moment for me. It was a gymnasium filled with tables from wall to wall, set up in a circle, and rather than there being a podium, each chief had their own microphone, and an operator moved through individuals who wished to speak in a calm and orderly fashion. It was nothing like I'd ever seen before.
We got back to Shauna's house, where she then showed us what goes into the work of planning her workshops. She emphasizes the role that youth facilitators play in her work.
So they're actually doing what I used to do. You know, go pick up the elder, bring the elder to her facilitation, facilitate with her, look after her or him, and then drive them home, and then there you go. And that's what we're really gearing towards, is to be able to bridge the youth and the elders, and now passing the torch to the next generation.
Next up, we see plenty of youth involvement, live and in person, with traditional dancing, singing, and drumming. That machine seems a little bit more sturdy than the other one.
What were you saying about more sturdy?
That was Malachi. We found him while we were waiting to speak with Matthew Garrett outside of the powwow that happens weekly on Tuesday nights at the Vancouver Aboriginal Friendship Center Society. Malachi was a bit of a troublemaker and was trying to get a loose can of Coke out of a vending machine. He was pretty cute, hey?
Yes, he was trying so hard to get it out and asked me to help him.
He also asked me. I only slightly helped him. When we met up with Matthew, he explained how powwows came to BC, since it's not traditionally apparent on the West Coast.
For like friendship centers, it was just a way to build community and have, just like that time to connect, especially for like younger kids to connect to culture. And the friendship centers were more in like urban settings, so you'll see them like there's one here, there's one in like Calgary, Winnipeg, Toronto. You'll see them in all those areas because they wanted to connect like urban youth, like Indigenous youth, to cultural space. So it'd be like people in community would take that up.
And boy, have the folks in Metro Vancouver taken up the opportunities available at the Friendship Center. Gradually, while we were there taking in the powwow for all that it was, dancers from teeny tiny tots to more mature adults filled the gymnasium.
Yeah, so I think like right now, it's really important because now you're seeing like, like young teenagers wanting to dance, and also like older folks wanting to dance. Like that's something that I've noticed.
Matthew started doing traditional dancing and singing once he moved to Vancouver.
Because I grew up in Alberta, but I moved here. So I think just finding a way to feel like more connected to home, because I was going to school and stuff and being away from family. So just finding other ways that help me feel more at home while I was here.
The other thing Matthew did after moving here was starting to plan the Tuesday night weekly powwows that happen at the Friendship Center. He found that with more youth involvement, he did it with his friends, that popularity for the event rose, and it was more accessible to people who really wanted to attend these events. They promoted it on Facebook and handed out physical posters.
Honestly, in a lot of ways, I think it really helped, build a positive connection spiritually, and just helping, find the things that I need to take care of myself, as someone who is Indigenous, and wanting to have that in my life and make that a priority. But also, I think it was important to do, see other young people want to get involved and stuff like that.
I think being at the powwow event, it's very beautiful to see so much joy in the community and people coming together and them being so welcoming, because I think oftentimes with reconciliation, we only see the really sad stories and the really tough parts, but sometimes we overlook just celebrating the joy that comes with this week.
I know for me, part of the most joy that I got out of being in attendance at this powwow was seeing all the little kiddos running around in their regalia, so excited to be there and being part of such a wonderful community. Later on in the night, Elder Mary Dorchett from Nitnet on Vancouver Island put that joy into perspective with something that she said ahead of the dancing.
I'm very honored to be here tonight. This was not what I was going to do. I was going to sit back and watch and take everything in. But being a survivor, we have the strength. We've gotten the strength from everything that we've gone through. All the hurts, the pains, the memories. The memories are still there, but I've learned to work through them. And I think a lot of other people have too. And people who were taken away from their families as children and babies, my heart goes out to you. But I believe the best thing to teach your children is culture. That's what's going to get us through life. That's what's going to keep us strong. And if we're all together as one, that's where the strength will be.
The rest of the night was filled with lots of joy, singing, and dancing, where Mary herself even joined in on the dance floor. The next morning, we reunited with Shauna at the Children's Hospice to attend a Kairos blanket exercise activity.
I see you tapping your toe out there. Get out on the floor and start dancing.
Bright and early, 8:30 a.m. the next morning, Grace and I are outside in the pouring rain out of the Canucks Children's Hospice, more ecstatic than ever for my first blanket exercise, but Grace's second. Grace, what was it like going into a blanket ceremony 10 years later?
Revisiting the blanket exercise 10 years later was definitely a very empowering experience for me, because with the greater knowledge I have on Indigenous issues today compared to before, being in a room full of women to do such a powerful activity was very moving.
As the blanket ceremony began, we helped set up the blanket ceremony itself, which was such an incredible honor. We placed script cards, so that's part of the blanket ceremony. So attendants will be responsible for reading scrolls, so passages that relate to the history of colonization in Canada.
One of the most striking moments for me doing the blanket activity was seeing the way the blankets got smaller and smaller gradually over time, and the people around me moving to different areas of the room and not knowing what to expect next. This really gave me perspective of what it was like to lose your home and your people. Seeing the strength and resilience of Indigenous peoples, as well as how gracious they are despite the hurdles they have faced, really inspired me to keep playing an active role as an ally towards reconciliation.
One of the things that moved me most about the blanket exercise was the impact it made on the woman in attendance. Overall, throughout the journey that we've been on, immersing ourselves in Indigenous culture as non-Indigenous folk, I'm so grateful to have seen firsthand the strength and determination of people putting themselves in painful situations for the betterment of reconciliation. I would like to spread my gratitude as well to Shauna and Martin Sparrow for allowing us in their home, bringing us to an elders meeting, and for Shauna taking us through a blanket exercise, as well as Matthew Garrett for allowing us to celebrate Indigenous culture at the powwow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Teresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretanero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.